There was a time when every American home had one of these. A glowing box in the corner, humming softly, surrounded by laughter, the smell of dinner, and the warmth of family. It wasn't just television. It was the heartbeat of a nation, a window into dreams, heroes, and stories that shaped a generation. Back in the early 1960s, America stood at a crossroads of optimism and change. The war was behind, the space age had begun, and the living room had become the new theater of life. Every night, millions tuned in, not just to watch, but to feel connected. Neighbors spoke of the latest episode over white picket fences. Children rushed home from school to see The Flintstones, while parents settled in for The Andy Griffith Show or Bonanza. Visual, suburban streets at dusk, neon lights from diners, the hum of old cars along Route 66. Television wasn't yet a machine of noise and endless choice. It was ritual, comfort, and wonder. The 1960s gave birth to what many now call the golden age of American television, a time when black and white slowly gave way to color, and when every broadcast felt like a shared memory in the making.
Let's go back to a time when the networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC, ruled the airwaves. There were only a handful of channels, but somehow that made each one sacred. People didn't scroll or skip. They gathered, they waited, they watched together. In those days, television mirrored America's hopes and contradictions. Shows like Leave It to Beaver painted pictures of innocence and order. The Twilight Zone whispered of fears hiding beneath that perfect surface. And Star Trek dared to imagine worlds where humanity had learned from its mistakes. Each episode, each commercial carried a quiet optimism that progress was unstoppable, that America's best days were still ahead.
Television in the 1960s didn't just entertain, it created legends. Lucille Ball taught America how to laugh at itself. Andy Griffith gave small-town kindness a face. Walter Cronkite became the nation's voice of truth. When the Ed Sullivan Show aired the Beatles' first appearance, 73 million people watched, a moment so bright it still echoes across decades. And somewhere in those living rooms, a young boy or girl sat mesmerized, dreaming that maybe, one day, they too could reach through that glowing screen and tell a story that mattered. The 1960s television world was alive with experimentation. Writers and directors crafted stories on tight budgets, yet somehow produced worlds that felt real because the heart behind the camera was genuine. Shows were filmed in small studios filled with cigarette smoke, the clatter of typewriters, and the laughter of overworked crews. No digital effects, no CGI, just imagination and an unshakable belief that stories could change people. Audiences could feel that sincerity. They felt it in the warmth of the Dick Van Dyke Show, in the drama of Perry Mason, in the wild adventures of Gilligan's Island. And for those who grew up then, each of those shows was more than entertainment. They were chapters of life. Television united America in ways we can barely imagine today. On Sunday nights, streets grew quiet. Families huddled close. The flickering light from the screen reflected in their eyes as if it were the campfire of a new age. We didn't just watch the Ed Sullivan Show, we experienced it. We didn't just see the moon landing, we lived it together.
It was a time when news anchors were trusted, when variety shows felt like family gatherings, and when every jingle, every laugh track was a thread in the great American tapestry.
But as the decade drew to a close, the glow of television began to change. The world outside was shifting. Vietnam, civil rights marches, political assassinations, and television could no longer look away. Suddenly, the comfort of black and white fantasies met the harsh color of reality. Evening news carried images of conflict and sorrow. Sitcoms grew bolder, dramas more daring. What had once been a mirror of simplicity became a window to America's growing complexity. And somewhere, amid the chaos, the innocence of television quietly slipped away.
Looking back now, it's easy to see why we call it the Golden Age. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but there was something honest in the way it reflected who we were trying to be. Television in the 1960s carried both the dream and the doubt of a generation. It taught us to laugh, to question, to hope. It gave faces to values, kindness, courage, curiosity that still linger in our collective memory. Back then, life had a different rhythm. There was patience in the way we waited for our favorite show. There was gratitude in every broadcast that reached us through static and snow. And maybe that's what we miss most. Not just the shows, but the feeling of being part of something shared. Those evenings weren't just about entertainment. They were about connection. Families sitting together, hearts beating in sync with the glow of a single screen. Neighbors talking over the fence about last night's episode. A sense that in a vast and changing world, we were not alone. Today, we have endless choices, hundreds of channels, thousands of shows. But something precious was left behind. The stillness, the unity, the magic of waiting for the world to appear in black and white.
Time moves on, as it always does. The old television sets sit quietly now, in attics, in thrift stores, in memories. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the laughter echoing through the static. You can still see the glow on the faces of those who once believed that the future would be brighter, kinder, better. Perhaps that's what the Golden Age truly was, not just a moment in history, but a feeling, a heartbeat, a shared dream that lived inside every American home. Maybe the past isn't gone. Maybe it just lives quietly in our memories, flickering in black and white, waiting for someone to remember. If you remember those nights, the laughter, the news, the simple joy of gathering by the glow, share your memories below. Tell us what television meant to you and which show takes you back to those golden years. Because the stories we keep alive are the ones that keep us alive too.